Well, by some sort of logistical miracle, I noticed I'm within 1, 2, 3, 4 of the Second Army here, so I was able to throw supply up there, and the Second Army was able to get some through the rail line as well, so that I actually was able to perform an attack over here, breaking across the Somme some more, and also an assault on this fortress. I've stripped all the troops of it, off of it, but haven't gotten the breakthrough that I wanted yet. But this is looking really, really ugly in the northern sector for the French. Of course, I still don't have any ammo for these big guns up here. But I did have ammo again for these guys. It's still a positional thing, although overall German supplies are dropping significantly. And in October, they only get 30. And 30 more in November. Well, I run through 30 very, very quickly. These attacks are taking, 10 or 8 rather than just small amounts each turn. So overall, I'm really questioning these attacks on this fortification here, simply because I do want to press down as close to Paris as I can possibly get. We're not going to see the historical sort of Battle of the Marne forming here. We don't have that kind of bulge happening. Instead, I've concentrated on the north with what I believe to be what Schlieffen plan should have accomplished. First of all, it was intended to sweep around to the side. And secondly, by keeping close to the coast, I cut off the ability of the Brits to land and cause problems back there. And I also, can't be outflanked as easily. I don't need as many men to defend the line. Now, granted, the Allies don't need as many men, or the Entente doesn't need as many men to defend its line either if it's more solid like this. But I always think in these kind of terms and try to build solid front lines. Something that, probably early World War I, they weren't thinking of. They were thinking of the bold strokes, like in 1870 or even back to the Napoleonic Wars. They did not think in terms of building this front line until it sort of devolved into that. Once it became clear that the war was going to be these pockets of defenses. But this, right from the very beginning, I've played it more like, my mind thinks, rather than how, historically things developed. And the French are just continuing to do their part, pushing more and more troops off the center line, where it doesn't seem the Germans are attacking at all, and I've had a little bit of extra force still there. Try to reinforce in here. Probably should have done it earlier had I done so. This may not have really been happening to the extent that it is. But, well, now there's kind of this threat. Hey, these things aren't terribly strong anymore. Maybe the Germans can overrun some of the trenches in the center as well and delay the ability of the French to actually build a line that can hold. Well, I did manage to pull another attack out of my ass. The Fourth Army, the easiest way to move supplies by rail, is actually moving a whole army command center. If an army wants to give supplies to another army, it can only shift 10. But I was able to shift the entirety of the Fourth Army. Granted, you have to pay extra rail points to move the army supply, the army headquarters, as well as the supply points that you're moving. But instead of just being 10 spaces along the primary tracks, it can run, up to 24 really, because it's 6 spaces per movement point, and it's got 4. So it slid itself into position up here, and that gave me enough points that I could launch an attack cracking over here. Just ignored this fortification. I also launched another attack here on Amiens, which, if Amiens hadn't been a city, the French would have had to retreat from it. But a city location is actually harder to take. It's like a fortress. It provides a certain stoutness. This was the one location I could attack, though. The only other option would have been here, which would have been less pleasant. I think, well, maybe not. But I would have been facing the river line, and here I was not. So with no terrain, hey, what the hell? And being able, I did more casualties to the French than they did to me. They're holding their position. but they're taking more losses. I also launched probably the last artillery attack from here until I get my new ammo in October, and I'm only going to get 30 then, so I may not send much of it there. The ammo that gets sent over land has to come by rail, just has to reach a headquarters on a rail line. Well, now I've got plenty of headquarters here in the north that I can, continue this attack with those extra 30 points. It is, of course, making this line that the French are occupying in the center less and less at risk if I shift all my supplies up here. As it stands right now, though, there are some significant German supply points kicking around. This guy's got 17 right now at the highest. So I can't really denude it completely, or they'll start punching holes in the line down there. Got to keep reinforcing up here, and I don't think the Allies are going to make any counterattacks here. It's just too expensive in terms of losses. And through the magic of swapping headquarters in and out again, the Germans managed 2 more attacks. This time taking Amiens and almost taking La Fère here. It's down to 1 strength point, as you can see. The Amiens loss was what, 15 points of demoralization for the French. They're already up to what, 447. The Germans right now are only at 179. And the English, well, I guess they're kind of unimportant at 62. Again, completely ignoring these sieges going on, they're just not worth the effort. I don't know who these guys are and why they're trailing back there. They probably ought to come up and do something. I think I didn't move them this turn. I'll probably try to correct that at least a little bit. I don't know. Drop some units up here. But yeah, the ability to continue this attack by swapping the headquarters feels like I'm cheating. I'm gonna look that sucker up. I can't find a prohibition against it. There's a talking about sending and receiving points, and that's the 10-point limit, etc. But obviously that can't count as expending the points for attacks, because that seems to be handled a little in a different wording. Anyway, it just feels really cheap to do this, but it's my workaround to allow the army to keep crunching. So as we push into October here, we can see some of the reinforcements set out. This is everything. There's supplies coming in for the French and for the Germans here. 30 for the Germans, only 15 for the French. That's going to make it pretty tough to even survive the attacks, really. They're only getting half as much. That's not pleasant at all. We're not going to see any major counterattacks happening there. But I think with only 30 for the Germans this month, we're going to see the war continuing at its kind of slow rate. A lot of replacement troops, they could attack at half strength, but that's pretty risky, especially if the defender still has any resources at all on their track. If they don't have resources, they're going to be counterattacking or defending, however you want to look at it, at half strength. So that's a pretty big deal. The next thing we do is we're entering the monthly special turn, the trench construction. And here are all those French trenches where they managed to hold on, which is really this entire line. And the Germans also built along there, are going to come into play. And we're going to see the game kind of changing tenor there. But there are some definite weak spots. Over here, this is weakened. Behind the Somme, there was no plan to be driven back from there. So there's a lot of places where the war can continue at decent odds for attacking still, where it's still pretty mobile. We haven't hit that full trench warfare. But here, where things were static anyway, well, now it's going to become even uglier, and maybe both sides can pull even more troops off the line. Certainly the Germans have a lot of force still over there. They haven't drawn their forces over because supplies have been their big concern. But they do have some pockets of supply there and maybe can make some headway. I don't know. I don't have high hopes for attacking against the trenches. It's another, well, it doesn't give a plus to the defender, which is kind of cool, but it does give a minus to the attacker over here. And that makes it much, much more difficult to drive the defender out of the space, especially when you're already getting minuses and pluses from the terrain. Plus, I believe, I'm going to have to look this all up, but it affects your retreat chances. Well, I'll come back to that because I'll have to look it all up and I'll talk about it at the beginning of the next video.